This was a study we did with some existing samples that we had from a prior study of overweight children.
And I said to Dr. Davis, I am really curious of the impact that secondhand smoke has on children that are already overweight. So the number one goal was to look at these children's stored blood, which we had permission to do, and measure their cotinine level, which is a measure of if they're exposed to tobacco or if they're smokers themselves, and see what impact it had on any obesity measures.
And a high level of cotinine in the blood indicates a person who's actively smoking. We didn't see any like that, fortunately, because these are young kids, but we did find that a substantial proportion of them apparently had been exposed to secondhand smoke.
The second goal was to also see if there was any impact of secondhand smoke also on their cognition and on how they had scored on some standardized cognition testing.
There are three main findings. One is that the children that were exposed to secondhand smoke had a significantly higher level of fatness.
So these children, unfortunately, are being set up at a very early age to face potentially diseases like diabetes, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, all those types of things that can predispose you to early heart attack, stroke, and other things later in life.
Another finding was that, and perhaps even more concerning, the children who were exposed did a little bit more poorly on a measure of cognitive ability. So it wasn't a huge difference, but they were lower on every single measure of cognition in the test. So it was consistent.
They scored lower on 4 specific scales of a very standardized cognition test. That is substantial.
That's concerning because that means it's possible that the secondhand smoke exposure is actually impacting their ability to do well in school. The third finding was, in a previous study, secondhand smoke exposure had been linked with diabetes risk. Of course, children now are coming down with type 2 diabetes. We used to call adult onset diabetes. We can't call it that anymore. And I'm quite concerned about that, which is why I study overweight kids. In this study, we found the secondhand smoke exposure was not related to that kind of risk. And we looked at it a few different ways. So that's one thing that the secondhand smoke does not appear to be aggravating. Children need fresh air. And when they go outside, they also get more physically active. So besides having better things to breathe, because indoor air is very polluted actually, even without smoke, go outside and move around a bit.
We want to set them up for success for intellectual health and success in school and graduation and college, etc., and being a contributing citizen. And we want to set them up for physical health as well, and for them to be the best they can be health-wise, physically and mentally, and their intellectual health. We need not for them to be exposed to smoke.
I guess it was the amount of children that were exposed and the relatively poor correspondence of the objective measure with the parental report of who is there a smoker in the household. Now, it may be that they're exposed to smoke outside the home, or it may be that the parent is simply not aware of the exposure that's occurring. So I was a little bit surprised by that, and I'm of course more confident about the findings given that it is an objective measure rather than simply a self-report.